Welcome to this edition of In Focus. I'm going to get right to the point on this one. I want to talk to you about October 7th. I want to talk to you about what happened in Israel. I want to talk to you about the response that we are seeing from all over the world and the lack of response that we are seeing from our spiritual leaders here in the United States. These are big topics. I'll be as concise as I can. You know, I shared a video recently stating that I was in my hotel room in London preparing to speak at a conference the morning of October 7th because of the time zones. It was still the wee hours here in the United States where I'm coming from right now. So most people in the US had not seen what it was that was unfolding in the fields and in Gaza and around the border between Gaza and Israel. Most people had not seen that, weren't aware of it. I had to go on stage and do a presentation knowing that the people in my audience were not aware of what was happening and that I wasn't fully aware of what was happening. But I knew enough to know that our world changed on October 7th. Now, one of the first things that we've been asked from our community is, where are our spiritual leaders? Where are the people that have taught us to meditate, that have taught us how to communicate with angels, that have taught us how to do all the things that we find in the New Thought community? Where are they right now? Because they are not speaking out about what happened on October 7th. I can't speak for those people. What I can tell you is I don't know. I have spoken with some of them, and what I find is they have said to me, what's happening on the other side of the planet is so intense they can't watch it. So they go have a diversion. They go for a walk on the beach, or which is fine. Or, you know, they go do some activity that takes their mind away from what's happening. We all need that sometime. But where are those teachers? Where are the tools? If the tools that they have been teaching us since the 1980s, when the New Thought movement, the most recent iteration, began, if those tools work, where are those tools right now? It's not enough to have spiritual tools that work only in the good times. If they can't help us navigate our hearts and our minds when we are hurting the way that so many of us are right now, in the face of what has occurred and what is occurring, those tools can't help us. What good are they? And if our teachers aren't there, what good are the teachers? Are they just fair weather teachers? And we have to ask that question. So I'm as disappointed as you are, many of you, because I have not heard from many of those people, including my friends and colleagues. And the ones I have heard from, one of the things they've said to me is they are afraid to speak out. They're afraid because the world is so polarized right now around what happened on October 7th. So this is the second thing that I want to say to you. I released a video a couple of weeks ago describing what is now being called fifth generational warfare. We are in fifth generational warfare right now. We are all casualties of fifth generational warfare. What does that mean? It is a kind of warfare that begins in the mind with our thoughts and our beliefs and our emotions before it ever becomes, or if it even ever becomes, a kinetic war with boots on the ground. It's a war of ideas. And I released that video knowing that what I was talking about applied to October 7th as well. I want to say this to you really, really clearly. What happened on October 7th is absolutely pure evil. And there is no equivalence and there is no justification for what happened on October 7th in Israel. It is pure, unadulterated evil. Now, a lot of people don't know that because fifth generational warfare and the algorithms in the social media that they rely upon for their information have prevented many people in the West, many people in the United States, certainly, from seeing what it is that actually happened on that day at the music festival and in the communities surrounding that music festival. I know this because of the protests that are happening in America on college campuses, and these are major college campuses. We're talking about Columbia University. We're talking about Harvard University. We're talking about Stanford, UCLA. The protests that are in support of Hamas, one of the organizations that carried out the attacks. They were not the only organization. They were the pioneering organization. I think they spearheaded it. And once it was underway, there were other groups like Islamic Jihad that jumped in to take part in the action. But largely Hamas is what is being identified and supported on college campuses. And I've seen interviews, and maybe you have too, with mainstream news media who ask the young people why they are supporting Hamas and if they support the atrocities that occurred. Now, some of those atrocities, I can't talk to you about them on this YouTube channel because they won't allow them on the YouTube channel. I have seen the images, and I have spoken to people who have also witnessed some of these images. And when the young people are confronted with the atrocities that happened, they deny that these atrocities ever happened. They said, if they happened, why haven't we seen it? If they happened, where are the pictures? If these things have actually happened, why don't we know about it? This is a perfect example of fifth generational warfare and the algorithms of censorship that prevent a full spectrum, a full picture of what happens for any event. But we're talking about October 7th specifically. So the young people don't know how bad it really was. All you have to do is see some of the interviews from the individuals whose job it is to prepare the bodies for Jewish burial. I just can't imagine how those people go home to their families at night when they describe what it is that they had to experience trying to put enough of a body together for a family to even give that person the burial. But what they say very clearly, the men prepare the male bodies, women prepare the female bodies. There's a battle that is playing out in our lives right now. It's an ancient battle between good and evil. That's no secret. It's been around as long as we've been around. That's no secret. Technology is now allowing perspectives and viewpoints and narratives to be driven that will support even greater levels of evil in our lives by perpetuating wars, by influencing the way that you and I, the policies that you and I agree to, the leaders that you and I choose to represent us, the funding that perpetuates the wars, not just in Israel, but throughout the world. All of that is being driven, you think about it, it's being driven by the way you think and the way I think. And whatever belief system you have, I'm going to invite you right now, do a little thought experiment. Where did the information come from that you base your belief system on? How sure are you that the information that you have been given or that has been revealed to you is accurate? Have you done your due diligence to look at other sources of information? It's not easy. And I talk about this in other videos. There are a lot of sources that are out there. When I was in London, I was watching video feeds coming from Asia, coming from the Middle East, coming from Australia, as well as throughout Europe and the United States. And I have to tell you, there's a vast difference in what we're being shown. They didn't pull any punches in the early videos that were coming out of the Middle East and out of Asia. And people in Europe saw what it was that was happening. America was not allowed to see. And those that were, there was an interview. I saw an interview with a journalist in Australia who was trying to find some kind of a moral equivalence between the atrocities that were committed and the hostages that were taken and what is happening in Gaza and has been happening in Gaza for 20 years right now. There is no equivalency, and there are reasons for that I talk about in other videos. But one of the things this news anchor was saying, one of the reports was that there were babies that were burned. They were burned because they were placed into ovens. And she came out, literally, she came out and she said, The evidence doesn't support that happening on the widespread basis that we believed. So listen to what she's saying. If one baby is put into an oven and burned alive, that is too many. And she's trying to say, well, it wasn't 40 babies. It was fewer than that. So somehow, that changes things. Or that there were beheadings that happened, and they did, for both adults and children. The sexual violence is off the charts, and many people don't want to talk about it. It's a really difficult conversation to have. The UN has a special agency now that they are putting together investigating this. Many of the women don't want to talk about it, or they're not alive to talk about it. So their bodies have to tell the stories. Many of the people that perpetrated the crimes were captured and under interrogation. They are revealing that these were their instructions, that they were given permission by their religious leaders to do these horrendous acts. This is pure evil. It's more than just killing someone. If you want to just take a life, that's one thing. It's quick. And that's not what happened here. The suffering was prolonged, and the torture was innovative in ways that we haven't seen some of this since the Middle Ages. And even beyond what we saw in Europe, in the concentration camps in World War II. But you're not hearing that. So this is the fifth generational warfare. Only a part of the story is getting out, and we are being divided. We're being divided as families, as communities, as society, as a nation, as a world. We're being divided based upon the way that this has been reported. At the very least, you've got to condemn the atrocities that happened, and you've got to condemn the people that did them. I've been watching a series of interviews from Andrew Tate to Finkelstein, a very well-known college professor and philosopher, who are refusing to condemn Hamas. They will not condemn Hamas. This is where we lose ground in this ancient battle. It's actually called creep, C-R-E-E-P. It's when you make allowances. You make an allowance for a certain kind of evil that you would never make an allowance for. And you say, well, it's justified because of. The minute you begin to do that, you are now stuck in the ancient trap that keeps you locked into the perpetual battle between good and evil. And although we're all in the battle, here's the thing, and I said this on another video, it went right over the heads of a lot of people that wrote in to me. They didn't understand what I was saying. That's my fault. I didn't say it clearly enough. So I'm going to do this again. Maybe I can be a little bit clearer. The question that we have to ask ourselves in this battle between good and evil is, what does the evil make us become? What does it turn us into? What do we allow ourselves to become in the presence of that evil and those atrocities? I did a late night radio program, talk show, 2 nights ago, and the interviewer took call-ins, and we had a caller, and maybe that caller is going to watch what's happening right here. I hope so. It was a man from somewhere in the United States. I couldn't tell where he was from. And he was adamant that we must hate. And he said time and time again, we must hate what has happened. We must hate these people. We must hate, what it is that's happened. And I had to push back on this, because this is the crux of the battle. Think about this. This is a deeply spiritual battle that is playing out financially, it's playing out economically, it's playing out socially, it's playing out politically, it's playing out kinetically through boots on the ground in Ukraine or in Israel or in Yemen or wherever it is, that the Congo, wherever you want to talk about it. Here's the battle. We're all going to get through this. The question is, what kind of people do we allow ourselves to become as we go through the process? Do we allow ourselves to be reduced to our primal instinct of hate and fear, and then lash out in retribution to try to get even with some force that's out there? Do we allow ourselves to do that? Because when we do that, evil wins. When we do that, we now are reduced to the fear that actually feeds that very evil, not to mention physiologically, it's not healthy. When you hate, it takes a lot of energy to hate. That hate compromises your immune response. That hate compromises your ability to heal and regenerate and rejuvenate your body. It shortens your telomeres. It produces a stress chemistry that creates the inflammation that underlies every other disease that you can think of. Cancer, arthritis, everything all the way down the line. That's what hate does. So we're going to get through this, and we have been presented with evil, flat out, unadulterated evil that there is no moral equivalence for. The Finkelstein guy that I was just talking about, I had to listen to the interview with him twice. He did one with Piers Morgan. Whatever your feelings are about Piers Morgan and his interview style, this was a really telling interview, because Finkelstein, his narrative that he made up in his mind is that there are these oppressed people that were in this powder keg, and the pressure got so great that one day it just blew, and it blew as this spontaneous group of people breaking out through the walls to perpetuate all of whatever it is that we see happening. We know that's not true. These were highly trained, well-financed people that were the ones that committed the atrocities. Had been planned for a very, very long time, largely financed through Iran. And the reason I'm saying this is because there was something, we were so close to the peace accords between Saudi Arabia recognizing Israel as a nation and other Middle Eastern countries normalizing their relationships with Israel. We were so very close to that. Iran didn't want that to happen. And that was one of the triggers in terms of why October 7th happened when it happened. It brought a fast halt to those peace talks, and I don't know, it's going to take time for those talks to resume, if those nations will ever consider those peace processes again, because of what now is happening in the region. So the idea that this is some kind of a spontaneous outbreak, that happened, and these are the people that will not condemn the evil. This is a big, big mistake, in my opinion. If we allow that evil to stand and we do not condemn the evil and the people that have perpetuated the evil and committed the atrocities, condemn it, but don't sink to the level of hate and retribution, that is where so many people are so quick to go, that make us want to lash out and get back at and elicit the fear and the hate within us. That's the spiritual battle. I had people write into me, again, Greg, you're splitting hairs on this. If you fight and kill someone else, you have fought and you've killed someone else. They're dead. It doesn't change that. And I agree 100% on the physical level. On the spiritual level, we are at a time in history, and I've talked about this in other videos. It's a rare and precious moment, the close of a cycle. We're going through shifts and changes, and our spiritual nature is what is allowing us to identify with certain kinds of futures and future timelines. All right. The kind of timeline for the world you and I want, a beautiful world of hope, possibility, opportunity. We're not going to achieve that if we succumb to the hate and the fear that turns us into the animals that are the animals that created the atrocities. And I think you can see where that's going. Doesn't mean that you don't respond. You do what you need to do to eliminate that evil in your world, but you do that from a place of the love of what's possible rather than the fear and the anger of retribution. And that, I think, is what's front and center for all of us. You have to ask yourself, what is the narrative that you're being fed? What is it making you become? What is it turning you into? And is it something that you want to be? And if the answer to that is no, you've got the tools to turn that around. You've got to recognize that it's happening first, and that we are all being manipulated. We're all being played, because in this battle of good and evil, deception is front and center right now. So you also have to ask yourself, how am I being deceived? I ask myself this question all the time, and to answer that takes a lot of work. You've got to go out and do due diligence. You've got to do some research. You might have to go onto the dark web and find images that you're not being allowed to see through your social media platforms for a lot of different reasons, if you want to be honest with yourself about what happened on October 7th. The world changed. This isn't a simple skirmish between the Israelis and the Palestinians like we have seen, or many people believe have happened in years past. And nations are aligning with nations, power structures are aligning with power structures over the narratives of what has happened. We are teetering on the brink of another global war. Many people believe we're already in a global war. It simply is not a kinetic war yet, because we are in a fifth generational war, the war that softens the battleground through the battle of thoughts and beliefs and ideas before or if kinetic warfare is ever used. We're all part of it. So I'm just going to invite you, when you're looking at what has happened, to just do a check on yourself. And if you cannot condemn the atrocities and the evil that happened on October 7th, you owe it to yourself to have a really good explanation of why that is. That's going to lead you on a journey, and I hope you're prepared for that journey. We cannot let evil stand. You've got to take a stand at some point. And for me, that's where this point is right now. So hope this makes sense. Drop me a line. Let me know how you feel about what we're talking about now. I'm going to do a separate video to keep this concise. We'll do a separate video on the politics of what's happened, because the politics are not what you're being told as well. And this is especially important for young people. Young people, you are the product of at least 2 generations where you have been given an incomplete history of the world, including America's relationship to the world. You're being fed a narrative that is designed to break this country and make it into something that it is not. So you have no way of knowing the evil that has played out in the 19th and the 20th centuries preceding us, because it's not part of the history that you're being shown. This is where we need the older and the younger generation together, because there are those of us that do have a memory and have lost friends and have lost family to that evil. It's only a generation away. 70 years ago is not that long. And even though we say the events of the Holocaust have ended, the thinking that led to that Holocaust 70 years ago, that thinking is still in place. It's still in the world. And it is rising now in ways that you could not possibly recognize, because you've never seen it before. You don't know what it means. You've lived in a free country, relatively free country, with freedoms that you are taken for granted because you've never been given a reason to think differently. And I apologize for the world that you find yourself in right now, because it hasn't always been this way. And in many ways, my generation has let you down, because you have not been led to understand the history of how we have become the freedom and how we have attained the ability to share thoughts freely and ideas freely. And we're losing those freedoms right now. It began in the mid-20th century with just the kind of thing that we saw happen on October 7th. We can't let that happen again. All right. So drop me a line. Let me know how you feel about this. I want to thank you for just allowing me to share some thoughts with you, one man's thoughts, and to share a little bit of your day with me. I appreciate it. I look forward to our next.